My name is Eleanor Catherine Mitchell, and I am 69 years old. What I'm about to tell you is the true story of how I discovered that my own sons murdered their father for money, and how I brought them to justice. It began on the coldest March morning I can remember, standing beside my husband's grave in Millbrook Valley Cemetery, when my phone buzzed with a message that would change everything. "I'm alive. That's not me in the casket." The wind howled through Millbrook Valley like a grieving spirit that Tuesday morning. March 30th, carrying the sharp scent of wet earth and the last traces of winter's death. I stood beside the open grave on Miller's Hill, watching as they lowered the mahogany casket containing what I believed to be my husband, Robert's body, into the frozen ground. Below us, the old stone bridge crossed Willow Creek, the same bridge where Robert had taught our boys to fish every Sunday after church, where he'd won the apple jam contest at our town's harvest festival for 3 years running. 43 years of marriage doesn't prepare you for this moment. Nothing does. The hollow thud of dirt hitting wood echoed across the cemetery like gunshots, the mechanical whir of the lowering device drowning out the whispered prayers, the hushed condolences from neighbors who'd known Robert since he was a boy working in his father's carpentry shop. "Mom, you're shivering. Here, take my coat," my eldest son Marcus whispered, but when he placed his hand on my shoulder, something felt wrong. I watched him dab at his eyes with a pressed white handkerchief, but his hands weren't shaking. His breathing was steady. When someone truly grieves, their body betrays them. Hands tremble, breath catches, tears flow without control. Marcus looked like an actor playing grief, not a man who'd lost his beloved father. Standing beside him was Tyler, my younger son, shifting restlessly in expensive Italian leather shoes that cost more than Robert and I spent on groceries in 3 months. Tyler kept glancing at his gold Rolex, a watch that had mysteriously appeared on his wrist 8 months ago, right around the time both sons had started visiting us more frequently. Even now at his father's burial, he was checking the time. "The service is running long," Tyler murmured to his wife Vanessa. "I have that conference call at 2. A conference call at his father's funeral. Vanessa nodded, smoothing her black designer dress that hugged her curves more appropriately for a cocktail party than a burial. "We should wrap this up soon. I need to get back. I have 3 client appointments this afternoon." I stared at them in disbelief. Where was the raw, inconsolable grief? Where were the red-rimmed eyes, the desperate reluctance to leave their father in the cold ground forever? Instead, I saw impatience, calculation, the subtle body language of people waiting for an appointment to end. That's when I noticed her, a woman in a navy coat, standing about 60 yards away, partially hidden behind the massive oak tree that had marked the cemetery's entrance since Millbrook Valley's founding in 1847. She appeared to be watching our small group with unusual intensity. When I tried to get a better look, she shifted further behind the trunk, but not before I glimpsed something in her hand, a phone pointed directly at us. Pastor Williams was concluding his words about eternal peace and heavenly reunions, but his voice seemed muffled as my attention fixed on my son's behavior. Marcus pulled out his phone and checked messages behind his funeral program. Tyler whispered something to Vanessa about getting this finished so they could handle the other business. What other business could be more important than burying their father? The service ended with the traditional throwing of earth onto the casket. I clutched a handful of the cold, dark soil that Robert had loved to work with his hands in our garden behind the house, where he'd grown prize-winning tomatoes for the harvest festival. As I let it fall, I whispered, "I love you, Robert. I'll find out what really happened to you." Marcus and Tyler each picked up small amounts of dirt, dropped them quickly without ceremony, and immediately pulled out hand sanitizer to clean their fingers. No lingering goodbye. No whispered words of love. No desperate final moments before leaving their father forever. "We should get you home, Mom," Marcus said, already guiding me toward the parking area where their expensive cars waited like vultures. "You've had enough for one morning. It was only 11:20 a.m., and the service had lasted barely 25 minutes shorter than Robert's weekly visits to Murphy's hardware store, where he'd helped customers fix their broken tools for free. As we walked across the cemetery's uneven ground past headstones weathered by decades of Millbrook Valley winters, my phone vibrated in my black purse. I almost ignored it. Who would text during a funeral, but something compelled me to check. Unknown number. I'm alive. That's not me in the casket. My legs nearly buckled. The words seemed to pulse on the screen like a living thing. I stopped walking so abruptly that Tyler, following close behind, bumped into me and muttered an irritated, "Careful, Mom." What's wrong?" Marcus asked, immediately reaching for my phone. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I quickly pressed the power button and clutched the phone against my chest. "Nothing. Just feeling dizzy." But my hands were shaking so violently, I could barely maintain my grip. Who could have sent such a cruel message? And why now, at this exact moment? "Here, let me help you to the car," Tyler said, taking my arm with what appeared to be concern. But as he guided me down the gravel path, I caught him glancing back toward the oak tree where the mysterious woman had been standing. She was gone. The ride home to our house on Maple Street passed in a haze of neighbors and condolences. Mrs. Henderson from next door had prepared enough sandwiches to feed half the town. The Kowalski family brought green bean casserole and stayed to serve coffee. Everyone spoke in hushed tones about what a good man Robert had been, how he'd helped fix their lawnmowers and built birdhouses for their children, how he'd taught half the town's teenagers basic carpentry skills through his volunteer work at the community center. "Robert was the most generous man I ever knew," said Mr. Peterson from the hardware store. "Just last month, he spent 4 hours helping me repair my shop's front door. Wouldn't take a penny for it. Said that's what neighbors do for each other." But as I accepted hugs and sympathy, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong. Robert had been beloved in this community for 70 years, yet barely 25 people had attended his funeral. Where were his woodworking customers? Where were the men from his Thursday night poker games at the VFW Hall? Where were the teenagers he'd taught carpentry skills to over the decades? Marcus and Tyler positioned themselves near the front door like funeral directors, accepting condolences with practiced efficiency. I noticed they kept checking their phones, and several times I caught them exchanging meaningful glances, quick secretive looks that seemed to communicate in some code I didn't understand. "We've already started handling the insurance paperwork," Marcus told me quietly as the last guests departed. "Dad's life insurance should process within 2 to 3 weeks. He was smart to increase the coverage when he did." I stared at my eldest son with growing unease. "When did your father increase his life insurance?" "About 10 months ago," Tyler answered before Marcus could respond. "Don't you remember, Mom? He said he wanted to make sure you'd be financially secure if anything happened to him. But Robert never made important financial decisions without discussing them with me first. We'd been equal partners in everything for 4 decades, from buying our first car to choosing our insurance policies. I would have remembered a conversation about increasing our life insurance, especially to an amount that would require higher monthly premiums we could barely afford. "How much are we talking about?" I asked, though something in my stomach already knew I wasn't going to like the answer. Marcus and Tyler exchanged that look again, a quick calculating glance that made my skin crawl. $150,000, Marcus said carefully, watching my reaction like a predator studying prey. The blood drained from my face. Our original policy had been for $25,000, enough to cover funeral expenses and give the survivor a small cushion. Where would we have gotten the money for premiums on a policy 6 times larger? Plus, there's the accidental death benefit, Tyler added, with what I now recognize as barely concealed excitement. Another $75,000 if the death was due to an accident or unusual circumstances. $225,000 total. A fortune beyond anything Robert and I had ever dreamed of possessing. "But Dad died of a heart attack," I said slowly, my mind struggling to process what I was hearing. "How is that an accident?" "Well," Marcus said, settling beside me on our faded floral sofa, the same sofa where Robert used to read his evening newspaper and help our boys with their homework. There were some unusual circumstances. The doctors mentioned Dad might have been exposed to some kind of chemical in his workshop. That could qualify as an industrial accident. Robert's woodworking shop behind our house was his sanctuary, a converted garage where he'd crafted beautiful furniture and toys with tools he'd maintained meticulously for decades. He knew every chemical, every safety procedure, every potential hazard in that space better than most professional carpenters. What kind of chemical? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. They weren't specific, Tyler said quickly. Something about wood preservatives or cleaning solvents. The important thing is you'll be taken care of financially. As my sons continued discussing insurance details and funeral expenses, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Instead, I slipped into Robert's study, a small room lined with his woodworking magazines and family photographs, and closed the door. With trembling fingers, I pulled out my phone and read the message again. I'm alive. That's not me in the casket. Taking a shaky breath, I typed back, Who are you? The response came immediately. I can't say. They're watching. Don't trust your sons. My heart hammered against my ribs so violently I thought it might burst. Whoever was sending these messages knew about Marcus and Tyler. They knew enough about my life to target me specifically with information that was either cruel and false or terrifying and true. I typed with shaking fingers, Prove you're Robert. A long pause. Then, You have a scar on your left shoulder from when you fell off your bike racing me to Miller's Bridge on our second date. You were wearing your yellow sundress with the tiny blue flowers, the one your mother made special for you. You cried not because you were hurt, but because you'd torn the dress. The phone slipped from my hands and clattered onto Robert's desk. No one else knew that story. Robert and I had never told our sons about that summer day 45 years ago, about how he'd carried me home and sat with me while my mother mended the dress with careful stitches, about how that was the moment I knew I was falling in love with him. Only Robert knew that story, but Robert was dead. I'd seen his body in the hospital, pale and still. I'd watched them close the casket with my own eyes. I'd just witnessed his burial in the frozen ground of Millbrook Valley Cemetery. Hadn't I? As I sat alone in Robert's study, surrounded by the scent of his wood polish and the memory of his gentle presence, a terrible possibility began to take shape in my mind. What if the person in that casket wasn't my husband? What if Robert was somehow still alive, trying to warn me about something I was too grief-stricken to see? I walked back to the living room where Marcus and Tyler were still discussing practical matters, with the cold efficiency of businessmen not grieving sons. As I listened to them debate the best way to liquidate Robert's tools and sell his workshop equipment, I felt the first stirrings of something I'd never experienced before, doubt about my own children. Later that evening, after my sons finally left with promises to check on me tomorrow, I walked through our empty house, seeing it with new eyes. In the kitchen, Robert's coffee mug still sat in the sink, where I'd left it that terrible morning 3 days ago. His reading glasses lay folded on the counter beside yesterday's unfinished crossword puzzle. But something was missing. I searched through Robert's papers in his desk, looking for his daily planner, a small leather book where he'd recorded appointments, project notes, and observations for over 40 years. It was as much a part of his routine as his morning coffee and evening news. The planner was gone. Someone had taken it, and I had a growing suspicion about who. As I stood alone in our kitchen, holding Robert's empty coffee mug and staring at his vacant chair, my phone buzzed with another message that would change everything. Look behind the apple tree in your backyard tomorrow morning. But wait until you're sure you're alone. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the old house, every whisper of wind through the bare March trees made me jump. I kept thinking about the mysterious messages, about Marcus and Tyler's strange behavior, about the missing daily planner, and the impossible insurance policy. At dawn, I made coffee and sat at our kitchen table watching through the window as pale sunlight crept across our backyard. The apple tree stood in the far corner, an old Honeycrisp that Robert had planted 20 years ago to celebrate our anniversary. Each fall, we'd harvest the apples together, and I'd make his favorite pie for the harvest festival. I waited until 9 a.m. to be certain my sons weren't planning any surprise visits, then bundled up in my coat and walked across the frost-covered grass to the apple tree. At first, I saw nothing unusual, but when I circled around to the backside, I found a small plastic bag tucked into a hollow in the trunk. Inside was a folded piece of paper with a local phone number and a name, Daniel Hayes, Private Investigator. At the bottom, someone had written in careful block letters, "Robert hired me. Call this number. Tell no one." My hands trembled as I dialed from my kitchen phone. A warm, professional voice answered on the second ring. "Hayes Investigations, this is Daniel." "Mr. Hayes, I found your number behind my apple tree. The note said my husband Robert hired you." "Mrs. Mitchell, I've been waiting for your call. I'm so sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry I had to contact you this way. Your husband was very concerned about your safety." "My safety? I don't understand." "Mrs. Mitchell, can we meet in person? What I need to tell you isn't safe to discuss on the phone. Do you know Riverside Park about 10 miles east of town?" "Yes, I know it. There's a pavilion by the lake. Can you meet me there at 2 p.m. today? And Mrs. Mitchell, if you notice anyone following you, don't come. Circle back home and call me immediately." My mouth went dry. "You think someone might follow me?" "I think your life is in danger, Mrs. Mitchell. Your husband thought so too." The drive to Riverside Park took 20 minutes through winding country roads lined with bare oak trees and fallow fields. I checked my rearview mirror constantly, but saw no other cars except an old blue pickup truck that turned off well before the park entrance. Riverside Park was nearly deserted on this cold Thursday afternoon. I found Daniel Hayes sitting at a picnic table in the covered pavilion, a man in his early 50s with graying hair and kind but tired eyes. He wore jeans and a brown leather jacket, looking more like someone's favorite uncle than a private investigator. "Mrs. Mitchell." He stood as I approached, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming. I know this must be incredibly difficult and confusing. Please call me Eleanor, and yes, I'm more confused than I've ever been in my life." Daniel opened a manila folder and spread several documents across the weathered picnic table. "Your husband hired me 3 months before he died. He was concerned about Marcus and Tyler's sudden interest in his finances and their pressure for him to make changes to his insurance and will. He showed me photographs that made my stomach lurch, images of Marcus and Tyler going through Robert's desk when they thought he was snapping pictures of them searching his workshop, even photos of Tyler photographing documents from Robert's filing cabinet with his phone. Robert was methodical about documenting everything," Daniel explained. "He suspected something was wrong, but needed proof before he could confront them or involve the police." "Did he get proof?" Daniel's expression grew grim. "More than enough. But Eleanor, what I'm about to show you will be very difficult to hear. Are you ready?" I straightened my shoulders, thinking of Robert's courage in investigating his own sons. "I need to know the truth." Daniel pulled out a small digital recorder. "These are conversations between Marcus and Tyler that Robert recorded over the past 2 months. He'd hidden listening devices in places where they felt safe to talk." He pressed play. Marcus's voice filled the pavilion, clear and chilling. "The methanol is working perfectly. Dad's been having dizzy spells and vision problems for weeks now." "How much longer?" Tyler's voice anxious. "Dr. Peterson says another 2 weeks should do it. The symptoms will look like a natural heart attack or stroke. No one will think to test for methanol poisoning." "What about Mom? She'll be easy once Dad is gone. We'll have her declared mentally incompetent due to grief, get power of attorney, and liquidate everything." Will she suffer?" "Not if we do it right. Same method as Dad, but faster. She'll just go to sleep and not wake up." I gripped the edge of the picnic table so hard my knuckles went white. They were planning to kill me too. "Yes. And Eleanor, there's more." Daniel played another recording, this one with Vanessa's voice. "Marcus, I need that money to pay off my personal loan. The bank is threatening to foreclose on my condo." "I know, baby. Just another few weeks and we'll have $200,000 plus whatever we can get from selling their house and Dad's equipment." You're sure no one will suspect anything? Who's going to suspect two successful sons taking care of their elderly parents' affairs after a tragic death will be seen as devoted children? Daniel stopped the recording. Vanessa needed money to avoid losing her home. That was her motivation for encouraging Marcus. And methanol, what is that exactly? It's wood alcohol used in some industrial processes and sold as fuel additives. In small doses over time, it causes exactly what Robert experienced: dizziness, confusion, vision problems, and eventually organ failure that looks like natural causes. It's virtually undetectable unless someone specifically tests for it. I thought about Robert's final weeks, how he'd complained of feeling unusually tired, how he'd stumbled a few times while walking, how he'd mentioned that his vision seemed blurry even with his glasses. I'd attributed it all to normal aging. They were slowly poisoning him, I whispered. Yes, and Eleanor, they've already started on you. Has Marcus or Tyler brought you any food or drinks since the funeral? I remembered the coffee Marcus had brought yesterday, how insistent he'd been that I drink it, how disappointed he'd seemed when I only took a few sips. Yesterday, Marcus brought special coffee. He said it would help with my grief. Don't consume anything they give you. Nothing at all. They're accelerating their timeline because they're worried you might get suspicious. Daniel pulled out another document that made my heart stop. There's something else. The life insurance policy Marcus convinced Robert to sign, it's fraudulent. What do you mean? The company doesn't exist. It's a shell corporation designed to collect premium payments and disappear. Marcus has been stealing money from your savings account to pay for a fake insurance policy. So they killed their father for nothing. Not nothing. They still plan to inherit your house, your remaining savings, Robert's workshop and tools, plus your Social Security survivor benefits. Probably close to $150,000 total if they could gain control of your assets and eliminate you quickly. The magnitude of the betrayal hit me like a physical blow. My sons had murdered their father for money that didn't exist and were planning to kill me for what little we actually had. But how did Marcus get Robert to sign the insurance papers? Daniel showed me photocopies of documents with signatures that looked like Robert's handwriting, but felt somehow wrong. Your husband was clever. He signed the papers when Marcus presented them, but he also photographed everything and made notes about feeling pressured and confused by the process. He showed me a sheet of paper in Robert's careful handwriting. Marcus brought insurance papers today. Said they were to protect Eleanor better, but the forms were more complex than necessary. Something felt wrong about his insistence that I sign immediately. He kept saying, "Dad, you're getting older, you need to think about Mom's future." Felt more like a threat than concern. Robert knew something was wrong, but he wasn't sure what. That's when he hired me. Daniel opened another folder. Eleanor, I need to tell you something that might upset you. The person sending you those text messages wasn't Robert. It was me. He asked me to contact you if anything happened to him using information only he would know to prove I was legitimate. I felt a mixture of disappointment and relief. Part of me had desperately wanted to believe Robert was somehow still alive. But this made more sense. How did you know about the yellow dress and my scar? Robert told me the story when he hired me. He said it was something only the two of you knew, something I could use to prove he'd really sent me if something happened to him. Daniel leaned forward, his expression serious. Eleanor, what I'm about to ask you to do is dangerous, but it's the only way to stop them and get justice for Robert. We need to catch Marcus and Tyler in the act of trying to poison you. The recordings I have are good evidence, but a prosecutor will want more physical proof of the poison, documentation of their attempts to control your finances, evidence of the insurance fraud. What do you need me to do? I need you to go home and act normal. Let them think you're just a grieving widow who doesn't suspect anything. When they bring you food or drinks, pretend to consume them, but dispose of them secretly. Meanwhile, I'll work with local police to set up surveillance and gather additional evidence. How long will this take? Not long. They're getting impatient and making mistakes. I think they'll make their move within the next few days. Daniel handed me a small device that looked like a car key fob. This is a panic button. If you feel you're in immediate danger, press and hold the red button for 3 seconds. It will alert me and send your location to the county sheriff's dispatch." As we prepared to leave, Daniel placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Eleanor, your husband spoke about you constantly during our meetings. He said you were the strongest person he'd ever known, and that if anything happened to him, you'd find a way to get justice. He had complete faith in your courage." Driving home through the familiar streets of Millbrook Valley, I felt a strange transformation taking place inside me. The crushing grief was still there, but it was being joined by something else, a cold, determined anger that seemed to straighten my spine and steady my hands. My sons had stolen more than money. They'd stolen my husband, my peace of mind, my faith in family. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated their mother. They thought I was just a helpless old woman who would quietly fade away when it became convenient for them. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The next 3 days passed in an elaborate performance that tested every acting ability I possessed. I played the role of the confused, grief-stricken widow, while Marcus and Tyler circled like vultures, becoming increasingly bold in their manipulation attempts. Friday morning, Marcus arrived with breakfast from Martha's Diner, my favorite blueberry pancakes, and what he claimed was a special coffee blend recommended by a nutritionist who specializes in helping seniors cope with grief. The coffee had that same bitter undertone I'd noticed before, with a sharp chemical smell that made my stomach turn. While Marcus arranged the food on our good china plates, an odd choice for a casual breakfast, I discreetly poured most of the coffee down the kitchen sink when he stepped outside to take a phone call. "How does it taste, Mom?" he asked when he returned, watching me with the intensity of a scientist observing an experiment. "It's different, very strong." I took a small sip and nodded appreciatively. "Thank you for being so thoughtful during this difficult time." "Anything for you, Mom. You know Tyler and I just want to take care of you." Over the next hour, Marcus steered every conversation toward my future living arrangements. "I drove by Sunset Manor yesterday, Mom. It really is a beautiful facility. They have art classes, medical staff on site, 24 hours, people your own age to socialize with, and the rooms are so much easier to maintain than this big old house." "I'm not ready to make major decisions yet, sweetheart. I'm still processing your father's death." His jaw tightened with barely concealed frustration. "Of course, Mom, but we shouldn't wait too long. The best facilities have waiting lists, and at your age, you'll want to get settled somewhere safe and comfortable." At my age, I was 69, not 99. Saturday afternoon brought Tyler and Vanessa for what they called an emotional support visit. Vanessa carried a large thermos of what she claimed was a healing tea blend my therapist recommended for trauma recovery and depression. The tea smelled wrong, cloying sweet with an underlying medicinal odor that reminded me of a hospital. I pretended to drink it while Tyler launched into a prepared presentation about practical financial matters. "Mom, I've been reviewing your bills and bank statements just to help you understand, and there are some serious concerns. Funeral expenses, ongoing household bills, property taxes, utilities. It's a lot for someone in your emotional state to handle alone." "Your father managed most of our financial affairs. I'm still learning what needs to be done." "Exactly why we should help. We could set up a joint bank account, consolidate your bills, maybe even get you a financial advisor who specializes in senior financial management. A joint account they would control with a financial advisor who would help them drain my assets legally." "That's very generous of you to offer," I said carefully. "Let me think about it." Vanessa leaned forward with what she probably thought was a caring expression. "Eleanor, we're also concerned about this house. It's so big and empty now, and frankly, it's not very safe for a woman your age living alone. What if you fell down the stairs? What if you had a medical emergency and no one found you for days?" "I have good neighbors. Mrs. Henderson checks on me regularly." "But that's not the same as professional care," Tyler insisted. "At Sunset Manor, there's always someone available if you need help. And think about the social benefits activities, meals with other people, bus trips to the casino and shopping centers." They had clearly researched their sales pitch thoroughly. "There's also the matter of Dad's workshop. Vanessa added with practiced casualness. It's just sitting there empty, full of expensive tools and equipment. We should probably sell everything while it still has value. Robert's workshop, his sanctuary filled with hand tools he'd collected over 50 years, and projects that represented a lifetime of craftsmanship and passion. I'm not ready to deal with that yet, I said firmly. Tyler and Vanessa exchanged that look again, the secret communication I'd been seeing between my sons all week. Of course not, Tyler said smoothly. There's no rush. But everything about their manner suggested there was very much a rush. Sunday evening brought the most blatant attempt yet. Both sons arrived together, always a dangerous sign, with Marcus carrying a thick manila folder and Tyler bringing an expensive bottle of wine. To help you relax and sleep better, Mom. We've been meeting with a lawyer about Dad's estate, Marcus announced, spreading official-looking documents across my kitchen table with the efficiency of a businessman closing a deal. There are some papers you need to sign to avoid probate complications and potential tax issues. I examined the documents carefully, taking my time, despite their obvious impatience. Mixed in with legitimate estate forms were several that would grant Marcus and Tyler complete power of attorney authorization to make medical decisions on my behalf, permission to sell my house, and access to all my financial accounts. This is quite a bit to process, I said. Could I review these more carefully over the next few days? Marcus's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing a flash of cold irritation. These are time-sensitive, Mom. The lawyer said if we don't file them by Wednesday, the estate could be tied up in probate for months. You could lose thousands of dollars in unnecessary fees and taxes. Your father always told me never to sign anything I didn't fully understand, especially legal documents. Tyler shot Marcus a warning look, but Marcus was losing patience. Mom, Dad is gone. You need to start making practical decisions about your future. We're trying to help you, but you need to trust us. I said I need time to think. As they gathered their papers with barely concealed frustration, I heard Tyler mutter under his breath. She's definitely getting suspicious. We need to move faster. That night, Daniel called with news that made my blood run cold. Eleanor. I've been monitoring their communications through the surveillance equipment we placed. They're planning to escalate significantly tomorrow night. They're worried you're catching on to their plan. What kind of escalation? I intercepted a text message from Marcus to Tyler. Old lady is asking too many questions. We finish this tomorrow or risk losing everything. Bring enough for a permanent solution. My hands tightened on the phone. Permanent solution. They're planning to give you a lethal dose of whatever they've been using. Make it look like you took your own life out of grief over Robert's death. The room seemed to spin around me. How do you know all this? We've had surveillance on both their homes and their cell phones for the past week. Tomorrow night they're planning to visit you for what they'll claim is a family dinner to remember Dad. During that meal, they intend to poison you with a massive dose that will cause immediate organ failure. What should I do? We're going to end this tomorrow night. I've coordinated with County Sheriff Morrison and Detective Walsh from the state police. We'll have officers positioned around your property, and you'll be wearing a recording device. The goal is to get them to confess their crimes on tape while attempting to poison you. That sounds incredibly dangerous. It is dangerous. But Eleanor, if we don't stop them tomorrow night, you'll be dead by Tuesday morning. They've moved past the point of trying to control you. Now they just want you gone. Daniel explained the plan in detail. I would invite Marcus and Tyler for Sunday dinner, just like the old family tradition. During the meal, I would gradually reveal that I knew about their crimes, forcing them to either confess or attempt to silence me. Police would be recording everything from hidden positions around my house. If you feel you're in immediate physical danger, just say the code phrase we discussed, I need to call Dr. Peterson about my heart medication. That's our signal to move in immediately. What if something goes wrong? What if they realize it's a trap? We'll have 4 officers positioned around your property plus Detective Walsh and myself in the surveillance van across the street. You'll be wearing a wire that transmits directly to us, so we'll hear everything in real time. After hanging up, I sat alone in my kitchen, looking around at the home where I'd raised 2 children, where I'd loved and been loved for 43 years, where I would soon confront those children with evidence that they had murdered their father. I thought about Robert, about his gentle hands teaching our boys to use tools safely, about his patient voice, reading them bedtime stories, about his proud smile at their graduations and weddings. How had those sweet children become monsters, capable of poisoning their own father for money? But I also thought about Robert's faith in my strength, about his certainty that I would find the truth and seek justice. Tomorrow night, I would honor that faith. Marcus and Tyler had underestimated their mother for the last time. Monday morning, I called both sons to invite them for dinner that evening. "I'd like to cook for my boys one more time," I told them, keeping my voice soft and vulnerable. "Just family like when you were children. I want to remember the good times before I make any big decisions about my future." Both seemed surprised but pleased by the invitation. "That sounds wonderful, Mom," Tyler said, his voice warm with what sounded like genuine affection. "What can we bring?"
"Just yourselves. I want to make all your favorite foods pot roast the way you used to love it: mashed potatoes, green beans from my garden, and apple pie for dessert."
"We'll be there at 6 sharp, Marcus promised.
"And Mom, this is exactly what we all need right now. Family time to heal and move forward together."
After hanging up, I spent the morning preparing what I knew would be the most important meal of my life. But first, I had one more task. I walked out to Robert's workshop, a space I'd avoided since his death, because it still smelled like him, still felt like he might walk through the door at any moment with sawdust in his hair and a gentle smile. Today, I needed to find something specific. In Robert's toolbox, I found what I was looking for: a small vial of methanol he'd used for cleaning wood stains. The label warned of its toxicity in large doses. This was the poison my sons had used to murder their father, colorless, nearly odorless, easily mixed into coffee or food. I thought about Robert's final weeks, about how he'd complained of feeling dizzy and confused, about how his hands had started shaking when he tried to work on his projects. My sons had watched their father slowly dying from the poison they were feeding him, and they'd felt nothing but impatience for the process to finish. At 4 p.m., Daniel's surveillance team took their positions. Officer Martinez hid in Robert's workshop with a clear view of our back door. Officer Chen positioned herself in the Hendersons' backyard with sightlines to our kitchen windows. Detective Walsh waited in an unmarked car at the end of Maple Street. Daniel himself set up surveillance equipment in a van across the street with direct radio contact to all units. "Can you hear me clearly, Eleanor?" Daniel's voice came through the tiny earpiece he'd given me. "Yes," I whispered, adjusting the nearly invisible recording device clipped inside my blouse.
"Remember, if you feel you're in immediate danger, use the code phrase. We'll be inside the house within seconds."
At exactly 6 o'clock, Marcus and Tyler arrived together, both dressed casually, but carrying themselves with the confidence of men who believed victory was within their grasp. Marcus brought a bottle of wine, while Tyler carried a small gift bag. "Something smells incredible, Mom," Tyler said, kissing my cheek with what felt like genuine warmth. For a moment, I saw the little boy who used to help me bake cookies for the school fundraiser.
Just like old times," Marcus added, settling into Robert's chair at the head of our small, round table, a presumption that made my stomach clench.
For one terrible moment, seeing him in my husband's place, I almost lost my composure. But I thought about Daniel's words about Robert's faith in my strength, and I found the courage to continue.
"I've made all your favorites," I said, bringing out the pot roast with carrots and potatoes. "Pot roast for Marcus, just like when you were 10 years old. And Tyler, I made that apple pie with the lattice crust you always loved."
Both sons seemed genuinely touched by the effort. Tyler even had tears in his eyes as he looked around the familiar kitchen.
"Mom, this is perfect," he said. "Just like Sunday dinners when we were kids."
We began eating, and for 20 minutes, I almost forgot why we were really there. Marcus told funny stories about his real estate clients. Tyler shared memories of Robert teaching him to use a wood plane. They seemed like the loving sons I'd raised, not the cold-blooded killers I knew them to be. But then Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a small pill bottle.
"Mom, before we go any further, Tyler and I want you to take these vitamins. Dr. Peterson specifically recommended them for seniors dealing with grief and stress. They'll help you sleep better and think more clearly about your future decisions. The pills were larger than before white capsules that I knew contained a lethal dose of methanol or some other poison. That's thoughtful, sweetheart, but I don't like taking medication with food. Let me finish eating first. Actually, these work better when taken with a meal, Tyler insisted. Something about absorption rates. Dr. Peterson was very specific about that. I looked at my sons, these men I'd loved more than life itself, and saw the predators they'd become. Why don't we finish dinner first? Then I'll take whatever medicine you think I need. Marcus and Tyler exchanged a look of growing impatience. As I served the apple pie, I made my decision. It was time. Before dessert, there's something I want to show you both. I walked to the counter and retrieved the folder Daniel had given me along with Robert's original letter and the small tape recorder I'd found in his workshop. I found these among your father's papers, I said calmly, placing photocopies of their insurance fraud documents on the table. Both sons froze forks suspended halfway to their mouths. Dad was more observant than you realized, I continued. He documented everything, the forged signatures, the unauthorized bank withdrawals, the fake insurance policy, and most importantly, the poison you've been feeding him. Marcus was the first to recover his expression, shifting from shock to cold calculation. Mom, I don't know what you think you found, but grief can make people imagine things that aren't real. You've been under tremendous stress. Methanol, I interrupted quietly. That's what you used to kill your father. Wood alcohol administered in small doses over several weeks to make his death look natural. Tyler's face went white as paper. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I picked up the tape recorder and pressed play. Their own voices filled the kitchen casual discussions of poisoning their father detailed plans to kill me. Next, cold calculations about how much money they would inherit. The recording played for 2 full minutes, while both sons sat in stunned silence. When it ended, Marcus began to laugh, a sound that chilled me to the bone. Well, the old lady isn't as stupid as we thought. Tyler shot him a panicked look. Marcus, don't say anything else. Don't say what she already knows, everything. Marcus stood up, his 6'2" frame towering over me as I remained seated. The question now is what we do about it. I know you killed your father. I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I know you've been trying to kill me, and I know why, for money that doesn't even exist. Tyler's face crumpled. What do you mean, doesn't exist? The insurance company is fake, Tyler. Marcus has been stealing from our savings to pay premiums on a fraudulent policy. There is no $200,000 death benefit. There never was. Tyler turned to Marcus with a look of absolute horror. You told me the insurance was real. You said we'd split $200,000 plus whatever we got from selling the house and Dad's tools. Shut up, Tyler, Marcus snarled. It doesn't matter now. We'll make do with what's here, the house, her remaining savings, Dad's workshop. Still probably worth $150,000. You killed your father for nothing, I said quietly. And you were planning to kill me for the scraps that remain. Marcus's mask finally fell away, completely revealing the cold, calculating stranger my son had become. Dad was a failure who wasted his life playing with scraps of wood. We deserved better than growing up poor because he had no ambition. He loved you both. He worked his entire life to give you opportunities he never had. When you were 12, Marcus, you wanted to go to summer camp, but we couldn't afford it. Your father worked double shifts at the furniture factory for 3 months to earn the money. When Tyler needed money for college textbooks, your father sold his grandfather's antique tools he treasured to help pay for them. Tyler began crying. Mom, I'm sorry. I never wanted it to go this far. Marcus said we'd just convince you to move into a nursing home, that we'd take care of you. With poison, I asked. It would have been peaceful, Marcus said coldly. Much more humane than what we gave Dad. He suffered for weeks before the end. Something inside me finally snapped. He suffered your father, the man who taught you to ride bicycles and throw baseballs, who worked double shifts to buy your school clothes. He suffered, and you watched.
He was dying anyway, Marcus said dismissively. Heart disease, arthritis, probably cancer eventually. We just accelerated the inevitable.
I stood up from my chair, and for the first time in my life, I felt genuine hatred toward another human being. You are not my sons. My sons died the day they decided their father's life was worth less than money. Marcus moved toward me with the pill bottle.
Tyler, hold her arms. We're going to make her take these pills right now, then wait for her to lose consciousness. Tomorrow morning, we'll call 911 and report that we found her dead. Tragic suicide brought on by grief.
Tyler hesitated, his hands shaking. Marcus, we can't do this here. Someone might.
We can and we will. She knows too much. As Marcus lunged toward me, I shouted the code phrase that would save my life. I need to call Dr. Peterson about my heart medication. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The front door exploded inward as Officer Martinez and Detective Walsh burst into the kitchen with weapons drawn. The back door shattered as Officer Chen entered shouting commands.
Police! Nobody move hands where we can see them.
Marcus spun toward the officers still clutching the pill bottle. This is a misunderstanding. Our mother is having a mental breakdown. She's been imagining things since Dad died.
We heard everything, Detective Walsh said, grimly handcuffing Marcus as he spoke.
Marcus Mitchell, Tyler Mitchell, you're under arrest for the murder of Robert Mitchell and the attempted murder of Eleanor Mitchell.
Tyler immediately collapsed into sobs. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. Marcus said it was the only way to secure our futures, that you'd be happier in a nice facility where someone could take care of you. The only way to avoid working for what you wanted? I said quietly. The only way to get rich without earning it. As the officers read my sons their rights, Marcus looked at me with pure hatred.
You think you've won? We'll get lawyers? We'll claim you're mentally incompetent, that you imagined all this, that you coached the investigators. Daniel entered through the broken front door with recording equipment and evidence bags. We've got everything on tape, including your full confessions. Your own words will convict you. Vanessa arrived just as the patrol cars were loading Marcus and Tyler into the back seats. She took one look at the scene, the broken doors, the police cars, her husband in handcuffs, and tried to run. Officer Chen caught her before she reached her BMW. Vanessa Mitchell, you're under arrest as an accessory to murder and conspiracy to commit fraud.
As the patrol cars disappeared into the March night, carrying my sons away from me forever, I stood alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the debris of our interrupted family dinner. The pot roast was getting cold. The apple pie sat uncut on the counter. Robert's empty chair seemed to watch over everything with silent approval. Daniel approached me carefully.
Eleanor, are you all right?
I looked around at the home where I'd raised 2 children, where I'd loved and been loved for 43 years, where I'd just watched my sons be arrested for murdering their father.
I'm alive,
I said simply.
And Robert's killers will face justice. That's what matters now. The trial of Marcus and Tyler Mitchell became the most sensational criminal case in our county's history. For 3 months, reporters from across the Midwest descended on Millbrook Valley's small courthouse, drawn by the shocking story of 2 successful sons who murdered their father for money that didn't exist. I sat in the front row every day wearing my best navy dress and the pearl necklace Robert had given me for our 40th anniversary. I wanted to look dignified and strong, not like the helpless victim Marcus and Tyler's defense attorneys tried to portray me as. Prosecutor Jennifer Walsh was a sharp, experienced woman who methodically dismantled every aspect of my son's defense. The evidence was overwhelming: Daniel's recordings, Robert's meticulous documentation, the forensic analysis of the poisoned coffee samples, the bank records showing fraudulent withdrawals, and the fake insurance policy that had been the center of their scheme.
Worse. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Walsh said in her opening statement, this case is about greed in its purest, most evil form. The defendants didn't kill a stranger for money. They slowly poisoned their own father, a man who loved them unconditionally,
and worked his entire life to give them opportunities he never had. They watched him suffer for weeks as the methanol they fed him damaged his organs and destroyed his mind. And when he died, they planned to do the same thing to their mother. The medical examiner's testimony was devastating. Dr. Sarah Kim, the county coroner, explained in clinical detail how Robert had died from chronic methanol poisoning administered over a period of 8 to 10 weeks. The victim's liver, kidneys, and brain showed extensive damage consistent with regular methanol exposure. Dr. Kim testified. The concentration of methanol in his system at the time of death was sufficient to cause the symptoms the family reported: dizziness, confusion, vision problems, followed by organ failure and death. This was not an accident or natural death. Someone deliberately poisoned Mr. Mitchell with the intent to kill him. When the prosecutor asked if the poisoning would have been painful, Dr. Kim's answer made several jurors visibly upset. Yes. Methanol poisoning causes severe headaches, nausea, difficulty breathing, and progressive organ failure. Mr. Mitchell would have suffered considerably during his final weeks of life. Daniel Hayes took the stand to explain how Robert had hired him after becoming suspicious of his son's behavior. Mr. Mitchell was a methodical, intelligent man who documented everything, Daniel testified. He knew someone was trying to kill him, and he was determined to protect his wife and gather evidence that would bring his killers to justice. Daniel played portions of the recordings Robert had made, including the chilling conversation where Marcus and Tyler discussed the timeline for their father's death and their plans to poison me next. Several jurors were crying by the time the recordings ended. The defense attorneys tried desperately to portray Marcus and Tyler as loving sons who had been driven to desperation by their parents' refusal to accept help with their finances. Marcus's lawyer, an expensive suit from Chicago, argued that Robert had been suffering from age-related dementia and would have died soon anyway. My client may have made poor decisions, the lawyer said, but he never intended to hurt anyone. He was simply trying to accelerate what he believed was inevitable, while ensuring his mother would be properly cared for. The prosecutor's response was swift and devastating. The defendants fed methanol to their father for 10 weeks, while he begged them to help him understand what was wrong with him. They watched him stumble and fall, watched him struggle to see clearly, watched him cry from the pain in his head. That's not mercy, that's torture. Tyler's defense was slightly different. His attorney portrayed him as a weak-willed younger brother who had been manipulated by Marcus into participating in a scheme he never fully understood. Tyler himself took the stand in his own defense, a decision that backfired spectacularly. Under cross-examination, Prosecutor Walsh forced him to admit that he had personally administered poison to Robert on multiple occasions and had actively participated in planning my murder. You brought your father coffee laced with methanol on March 15th, didn't you, Mr. Mitchell? Walsh asked. Yes, but Marcus told me it was just a mild sedative to help Dad sleep better. And on March 18th, you gave him orange juice with methanol mixed in. Yes, but... and on March 22nd, you personally put methanol in his evening soup. Tyler broke down completely. I didn't want to hurt him. Marcus said it would be peaceful that Dad would just go to sleep and not wake up. He said Dad was suffering anyway, and we were being merciful. But your father didn't die peacefully, did he? He suffered for weeks before he died. I know, Tyler sobbed. I know, and I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Vanessa also testified, having agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. Her testimony revealed the financial pressures that had motivated the conspiracy. Marcus became obsessed with his parents' money, she told the court. He calculated how much they had in savings, how much the house was worth, how much they were spending on daily expenses. He said it was wasteful for elderly people to live in a big house when they could be in a senior facility.
Did you object to these discussions? Walsh asked.
At first, yes, but I was facing foreclosure on my condo. I needed $50,000 immediately, or I would lose everything. Marcus promised that after his parents died, there would be more than enough money to solve all our problems. When did you learn they were planning to murder Robert Mitchell? Vanessa's voice dropped to a whisper. About 2 months before he died. Marcus showed me the methanol and explained how it would look like natural causes. I told him I didn't want any part of it, but he said it was too late to back out. Did you try to warn Robert or Eleanor Mitchell?
No. Vanessa began crying. I should have, but I was scared of losing my home. I convinced myself that maybe they wouldn't really go through with it. The most damaging testimony came from Dr. Richard Phillips, the physician Marcus and Tyler had bribed to declare me mentally incompetent. When investigators questioned him, they discovered he'd lost his medical license 2 years earlier for providing fraudulent evaluations. The defendants paid me $5,000 to examine their mother and declare her mentally unfit to manage her own affairs, he admitted on the stand. I was told she was suffering from grief-induced dementia and paranoid delusions. I never actually planned to conduct a legitimate examination. I was going to base my report entirely on what her sons told me about her behavior. Had you ever met or examined Eleanor Mitchell? Walsh asked. No. Marcus Mitchell sent me detailed notes about her supposed symptoms, and I was going to write a report declaring her incompetent based on those descriptions. Even though you had never met her and your medical license had been revoked.
Yes, I needed the money. Marcus chose not to testify in his own defense, probably because his lawyers knew he would come across as cold and calculating. But the jury heard his voice repeatedly in the recordings Robert had made, planning his father's murder with the clinical detachment of a business transaction. After 4 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for only 8 hours. They found Marcus guilty of first-degree murder conspiracy to commit murder insurance fraud, elder abuse, and attempted murder. Tyler was convicted of the same charges, but with second-degree murder, acknowledging that he had been following Marcus's lead rather than initiating the conspiracy. At sentencing, Judge Patricia Morrison delivered a statement that was quoted in newspapers across the country. In 38 years on this bench, I have presided over hundreds of murder cases. I have seen crimes of passion, crimes of desperation, crimes committed by people driven to violence by circumstances beyond their control. But I have never encountered such callous disregard for human life and family bonds as I see in this case. You murdered your father not in a moment of anger or desperation, but slowly, deliberately over a period of weeks. You watched him suffer. You watched him beg for help, understanding what was wrong with him. You comforted him while you poisoned him, and when he died, you immediately began planning to murder your mother in the same way. You showed no remorse, no recognition of the magnitude of your crimes against the man who loved and raised you. Your only concern was whether you would be caught. Marcus received life in prison without the possibility of parole. Tyler got life with the possibility of parole after 35 years. Vanessa received 12 years for conspiracy and accessory charges. As the bailiffs led my sons away in shackles, Tyler turned back to me with tears streaming down his face. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I love you. I looked at him, this man who had once been my baby, my little boy who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms, and felt a complicated mixture of grief and forgiveness. I love you too, Tyler, I said quietly. But love doesn't undo what you've done, and it doesn't bring your father back. Marcus never looked back. Even facing life in prison, he showed no remorse, no recognition that he had destroyed his family for money that never existed. 4 years have passed since the trial ended, and Millbrook Valley has slowly returned to its quiet rhythms, though the story still occasionally surfaces in true crime documentaries and magazine articles. People treat me differently now, some with pity, others with a kind of respectful awe for the woman who brought her husband's killers to justice despite their being her own sons. I've learned to live with both reactions, understanding that my story has become part of the town's history, a cautionary tale about greed and family betrayal that parents use to teach their children about the importance of character over wealth. The fraudulent insurance money that Marcus and Tyler killed for was never recovered because it never existed. But the investigation into their crimes led to the discovery of a multi-state insurance fraud ring that had been operating for years. Several other families who had been victimized by similar schemes
received compensation through a victims fund established by the FBI. With the money recovered from Marcus and Tyler's assets, their expensive cars, Vanessa's condo, and various investments they had made with stolen funds, I established the Robert Mitchell Memorial Scholarship Fund. Each year, we award 5 scholarships to young people in our community who want to learn skilled trades, woodworking, carpentry, plumbing, electrical work, or furniture making. The most recent recipient was a 19-year-old named Jake Morrison, whose father abandoned the family when Jake was 12. Jake had been working part-time at the hardware store while finishing high school, showing a natural talent for fixing things and helping customers with their home repair projects. Mrs. Mitchell, Jake wrote in his thank you letter, "This scholarship means I can go to trade school without putting my mom deeper in debt. But more than that, it means someone believes in me and thinks I can make something of myself with my hands, just like your husband did." I promise to honor Mr. Mitchell's memory by working hard and helping other people whenever I can. I keep that letter in my kitchen drawer and read it whenever I'm feeling particularly lonely or wondering if Robert's death has any meaning beyond the evil that caused it. I also used some of the recovered money to convert Robert's workshop into the Millbrook Valley Community Arts Center, where senior citizens and young people work together on woodworking, pottery, quilting, and other traditional crafts. The center's most popular program is our intergenerational mentorship project, where experienced craftspeople teach their skills to teenagers who might otherwise have no exposure to working with their hands. The center also hosts a weekly grief support group that has helped dozens of people process loss in healthy ways. Many of the participants are elderly people who have lost spouses, but we also see younger people dealing with the death of parents, siblings, or friends. Grief shared is grief diminished, I tell the group members. When we support each other through the worst times, we discover strengths we didn't know we had. I still live in our house on Maple Street, though it feels different now, quieter, but somehow more purposeful. The rooms where I once raised 2 children are now filled with photographs of scholarship recipients, thank you letters from community center participants, and mementos from the many visitors who stop by to hear my story and offer their own experiences with family betrayal or elder abuse. Daniel Hayes has become my dearest friend and closest confidant. Every Sunday after church, he comes by for coffee and homemade pie, and we spend the afternoon working in the memorial garden I planted in Robert's honor. Daniel lost his wife to cancer 3 years before I met him, so we understand each other's grief without needing to explain it. "You know," Daniel said last Sunday as we picked apples from the tree where I first found his contact information, "Robert would be proud of what you've built from this tragedy." "Do you really think so?" "I know so. He told me during our last conversation that you were the strongest person he'd ever known, and that if anything happened to him, you'd find a way to make something good come from it. I think about Robert every day, but the sharp edge of grief has softened into something more like peaceful remembrance. I talk to his photograph on the mantle, update him on community news, tell him about the young people who are learning woodworking skills through his scholarship program and the friendships that have formed at the community center. Sometimes I imagine I can feel his presence in the workshop turned community center, approving of the decision to transform his private sanctuary into a place where his love of craftsmanship can inspire new generations. The hardest part isn't the grief, it's the regret. I still replay those final months, wondering if I could have seen the signs earlier, if I could have protected Robert somehow. But Daniel reminds me that Robert knew the danger he was in and chose to investigate rather than confront his sons directly because he wanted to protect me from the truth as long as possible. He died fighting to save you. Daniel told me recently as we walked through downtown Millbrook Valley during the annual Harvest Festival, the same festival where Robert used to win prizes for his apple jam and wooden toys. That's exactly how a man like Robert would want to be remembered. I've had no direct contact with Marcus or Tyler since their sentencing, though Tyler has written me several letters from prison. I finally read them last year, 4 years after they arrived. Tyler's letters are filled with remorse and detailed apologies, explanations of how Marcus manipulated him, and promises that he's using his time in prison to become a better person through counseling and education programs. Marcus has never attempted to contact me, which doesn't surprise me. Even in his final moments of freedom, he showed no genuine remorse, only anger at being caught and punished for his crimes. People often ask if I'm angry if I hate my sons for what they did. The answer is complicated and has evolved over the years. I grieve for the boys they used to be the men they could have become if greed and entitlement hadn't poisoned their hearts. I hate their actions while struggling to completely hate the children I once rocked to sleep and cheered at Little League games. What I've learned is that family isn't defined by blood alone. It's defined by love, loyalty, mutual respect, and shared values. Marcus and Tyler stopped being my family the moment they decided their father's life was worth less than their inheritance. They became strangers who happened to share my DNA. But I've gained a new family over these 4 years, the community that rallied around me during the trial, the friends who check on me regularly, the young people who benefit from Robert's scholarship fund and call me Grandma Eleanor, even though we're not related. Daniel, who listens to my stories about Robert and shares his own memories of his late wife. Mrs. Henderson next door, who still brings casseroles when she thinks I'm having a difficult day. Last month, I received a visit from Jake Morrison, the scholarship recipient, who's now in his 2nd year of trade school. He brought his girlfriend Sarah and their 6-month-old baby daughter. Mrs. Mitchell, Jake said, bouncing little Emma on his knee. I wanted you to meet my family and tell you that I'm graduating next month with the highest grades in my class. I've already got a job lined up at Thompson Construction, and my boss says if I keep working hard, I can become a partner in a few years. Your husband's scholarship didn't just pay for my education, Sarah added. It gave Jake confidence to believe in himself. He talks about Mr. Mitchell all the time, about how a man who never met him believed he was worth investing in. As I watched Jake play with his daughter, I thought about the ripple effects of both evil and good. Marcus and Tyler's crimes destroyed our immediate family and caused immeasurable pain. But Robert's death also led to scholarships that have changed young lives, a community center that brings people together, and a support system that helps others heal from their own tragedies. This morning, as I finish writing this account at my kitchen table, I can see through the window to the community center, where a group of teenagers are learning to make birdhouses under the guidance of Mr. Peterson from the hardware store. Their laughter carries across the yard, mixing with the sound of hammer-on-wood sounds Robert would have loved. Tomorrow marks the 4th anniversary of Robert's death. I'll visit his grave with fresh roses from our garden and the newspaper he always liked to stay informed about local politics. I'll tell him about Jake's graduation, about the new pottery class at the community center, about the letter I received from a woman in Ohio who read about our case and used it to help her recognize that her own son was financially abusing her. And I'll make him the promise I make every year. Robert, love, I'm living fully enough for both of us. Your death was not in vain. The message that started this nightmare, I'm alive, trust no one, turned out to be prophetic in a way I never expected. Robert wasn't alive in that casket, but his love, his values, and his commitment to truth lived on through my determination to seek justice and transform tragedy into purpose. The warning to trust no one taught me its inverse truth. There are people worthy of trust, but trust must be earned through actions and character, not assumed through blood relations or family ties. I am 73 years old now. I am a widow, a mother who lost her sons to their own greed, a woman who learned that survival sometimes requires becoming someone you never thought you could be. But most importantly, I am Eleanor Catherine Mitchell, a woman who refused to be a victim, who fought for justice when it would have been easier to surrender, who transformed devastating loss into lasting purpose, and found meaning in the midst of unimaginable betrayal. Standing in my memorial garden this evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold over Millbrook Valley, I whispered the words I say every night. Robert loved justice was served. Your legacy lives on. You can rest in peace now. And for the first time since that terrible day at the cemetery, I felt completely at peace myself. At my husband's funeral, I got a message, I am still alive, Trust no one? It wasn't from Robert. It was from the private investigator he'd hired to protect me. That message saved my life and led to justice for the man I loved for 43 years.
Eleanor Catherine Mitchell, Millbrook Valley, Illinois, 2024.
Author's note: this memoir is based on true events. Names and certain details have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved. If you or someone you know is experiencing elder abuse, financial exploitation, or family violence, please contact your local authorities or the National Elder Abuse Hotline at 1-855-500-3537. Resources are available, and you are not alone.